The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Leela Rhodes and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. We are very excited to host today's webinar, Microsoft Security, Compliance, and Identity Masterclass. Presenting today's topic is Vishal Nigam. And Vishal is an experienced corporate trainer, having over 12 or 10 years of experience in various technologies. Vishal has delivered more than 3,000 corporate training batches on different technologies, and his skills include AI, ML, blockchain, RPA, Python, Golang, DevOps, cloud computing, and Vishal has more than 7 years of experience in blockchain, and he's built various products on blockchain and has trained more than 5,000 participants globally. He is also a global speaker. And now please bear in mind that this is just an overview of a very robust topic, but we do offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored towards your specific requirements. So if you're interested in a further discussion about any of those, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at www.netcomlearning.com. And today's session is also being recorded, so you will get free access to that recording in the next 24 hours via email. Netcom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. And we do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We have 9 practice areas in which we specialize, and they encompass people, process, and technology training. Today's presentation is from the security practice area. Netcom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio for security courses, and our upcoming classes include various training on Microsoft Identity and Access Administrator, Microsoft Azure Security Technologies, Microsoft Security, Compliance, and Identity Fundamentals, and many more. Now, private training to teams is also available, and those learning plans can be customized to the specific needs of that audience. You can also access a variety of security and marketing assets, such as the free 1-hour training, free on-demand training, and blogs by clicking on the available webinar handout. And these offerings can also be found with a simple search on our website at www.netcomlearning.com. In this webinar, you will learn the basic concepts of security, compliance, and identity. The webinar will also help you discover the capabilities of Microsoft Identity and access management solutions and explore Microsoft compliance solutions. Now, I'll just give you a quick overview of the logistics before we do get started today. To start with, you have the option to adjust the window size to your liking. You can simply hit the escape key and find the zoom button on the top left corner of your GoToWebinar viewer. Everyone has been muted except for our presenters, but you can feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters in the questions panel, and we will address them at the end of the session. Also, to get the best out of today's webinar, we've included the slides, courses we've talked about, and our marketing assets in the handout section of your GoToWebinar viewer, and you can refer to those to get a better understanding of the topic. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass the time over to Vishal to present today's topic. How are you doing today?
All right. Thank you very much, Leela. Thanks a lot for giving this beautiful introduction, and I am good to go. All right, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Absolutely. Let me bring my screen right away. Okay, that is good. So if everyone is able to look at my screen, please type 1 on the chat so everyone will be able to see that. And we're going to get started in a moment. All right, so welcome everyone to this Microsoft Security Compliance and Identity Masterclass. My name is Vishal Nigam. I will be your instructor for this beautiful session that we're going to have for the next 2 hours. Now, before we get started, as Leila already introduced me, I'm going to quickly bring you myself on the screen so you know I'm a bot. I'm a hero, human being who's talking here. So I've been actively working, training on the cloud ecosystem for over I would say 10 years now, and I'm certified in pretty much everything that exists on the market right now. I'm a certified instructor for Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, and I build systems day in, day out. That's one of my core expertise. I consult organizations on a global capacity. I'm a full stack developer, and there's a lot of things that I kind of do on a daily basis. So that's a bit about my side, and let's get started with this. Now, this webinar is on the security and compliance and pretty much on identity. Now, let's try and understand why do we even need compliance? Why there's a need for the compliance when we get and start building systems on the cloud, because the world we're living in, that's all the cloud basis. And as more business data is being accessed away from locations outside of our traditional corporate network, I believe security has become an overriding concern. Organizations kind of need to understand how they can really best protect their data, regardless of where it's accessed from, or whether it kind of sits on their corporate network or in the cloud. We have to ensure our data is secure, the access is secure, the people who are accessing it having enough permissions to do that. And that is a bit on what we're going to talk about in this webinar, in this session, how we get started. So the agenda is very simple, as you can see on the screen. We're going to talk about the basic concept of security, compliance, and identity. Why do we need that? Some of the capabilities of what and how Microsoft addresses this concern in terms of identity and access management solution. And then there is a segment of the Microsoft security solution. Eventually, we'll talk about some of the compliance solution. And the whole focus is going to be about or revolving around these segment there. Now, let's talk about in the most generic sense in the terms of security. So if you look at this, we know that security is job one when it comes to cloud, and how important it is that you find accurate and timely information about the Azure security. And one of the best reasons to leverage security for your application and services is that you want to take advantage of this wide array of security tools and capabilities which are being offered by platform or companies like Microsoft, because building that robust model is very hard when you have to do it all by yourself, because there's a huge amount of investment, there's a huge amount of time involved, there's effort to build a system, and then there are efforts to manage the system. And there are these tools and capabilities which, sorry about that, which kind of help you to make it possible, so you're able to create these secure solutions on the platform. And Microsoft Azure is one thing which gives you confidentiality, which gives you integrity, which gives you availability of the data, and also helps you to enable a transparent accountability. And we all understand, give me a moment. Sorry. Now we understand that we are working in the world that we refer as the cloud. We are talking about cloud computing, and eventually our focus is on the Azure. Our focus when we talk about Microsoft, to be precisely, that is all Azure itself. Now, we understand Azure is a public cloud service platform that supports a broad selection of operating systems and programming languages, and there are these frameworks and tools and databases and devices. There are so much in terms of offering. You can even run virtual machines, you can run containers, you can run so many things which can help you to build a solution. Now, when we come to Azure as a public cloud services, you can imagine it supports the same technologies as you all and we all are leveraging as IT professionals. And what we are looking for when it comes to someone else, I want to grab some water, guys. Just give me a moment. Sorry about that. That happens. So I was talking about that. When we look into Azure, the most important thing that we are actually going to be worried about is trust. Can we trust this cloud platform? Is there a way that we can enable the same trust we probably have with our on-prem scenario? And the reason we believe that on-prem is great is because we have control over there. We can control every aspect of our infrastructure, whether it's deployment, whether it's security, whether it's accessibility, whether it's compliance, whether it's audit. We are pretty much in control of everything. Now, Azure on the side, when you build on or migrate your assets to a public cloud service provider, you're kind of relying on the organization ability. So they are going to protect your application, your data with all the offering in terms of services and what controls they provide you to manage the security of your cloud-based asset. And Azure infrastructure is designed from facility to applications for hosting millions of customers simultaneously. And the best part is that it provides you a trustworthy foundation upon which businesses can really meet in the security requirements. And apart from that, the way I would prefer that is Azure is going to give you an array of these configurable security options that you can leverage to build your system, to build your solution. That cloud eventually, as we understand now, plays a very, very able role. It allows you to leverage these technology, and at the same time, you want to trust the foundation on which these cloud computing solutions are actually built upon. It is going to help you understand that. And if you look at the whole model of security, the model of understanding, the objective is we kind of believe in a model of trust methodology, that we want to trust whosoever we are trying to build upon. And when it comes to our data, when it comes to our application, when it comes to our user, our customers, we are very selective at how and when we should be able to select these partners. We should be able to select these roles there, and that is an important part of it. And if you look at one of the data privacy and model there, just in one of the segments, in one of the industry there, you can see there in the healthcare itself, in August 29, there are a number of patient records that were breached, and that is not acceptable. And to do this, there's a compliance that kind of happens to exist called as HIPAA, which is meant for keeping the patient data safe and secure. What happens now? If you are building your solution on these platforms, you got to be very careful about how do we build a solution? How do we ensure that at any point of time, we are now in a situation that we can trust these partners, we can build a system, we can build a solution. At the same time, you are in a situation to ensure that applications are running effectively in the cloud. And cloud application and even the mobile workforce, they have redefine the security perimeter. Employees are kind of bringing their own devices and then they're working remotely. So data is being pretty much accessed outside the corporate network, and it's even shared with external collaborators like your partners and your vendors. And then there are these corporate applications and data which are pretty much moving from on-the-prem to a hybrid ecosystem, or eventually are going all in the cloud environment. And this new definition isn't really defined by the physical location of the organization. It now kind of extends to every access point that hosts or store your corporate resource and services. And interacting with these corporate resource and service kind of bypasses your on-prem, perimeter-based security model that can rely on all these traditional network firewalls and then these VPN connection. And organizations, they kind of rely on these firewall VPN. They kind of lack a visibility in terms of solution integration, and then there is agility to kind of deliver timely manner. And today, if we talk about this, organizations, they need a new security model that more effectively adapts to the complexity of this modern environment. You want to embrace the whole workforce. You want to protect the people. You wanna protect your devices and applications and data where it's located there. And to do this, we want to build a model we call as a zero trust model. This is what we refer as a zero trust model. And what happens there? Instead of believing everything behind the corporate firewall is safe, the zero trust model assumes the breach and verifies each request as it kind of originates from some uncontrolled network there. So regardless of where the request is originating from or what resource it kind of access there, zero trust is something which teaches us never trust, always verify. Even though that request is coming from someone that your organization knows about, that don't trust. We should always verify. So in a zero trust model, we can say that every access request is strongly authenticated, strongly authorized with all the policy constraints, and it's going to be inspected for anomalies before granting the access. And everything from the user's identity to the application, pretty much hosting is used to prevent that breach. So we kind of start applying what we call as these micro segmentation and the principle of least privilege. So we want to minimize the accessibility even for individuals who are there. And then there's this rich intelligence, and there is analytics that helps you to identify what happened, what was really compromised, and how am I going to prevent it from ever happening again. So the way you want to build your system, you have to ensure that there is a principle of zero trust enabled in that segment. And when we look at Azure, the job of Azure as a cloud platform, as I said a few times already, it's a platform that gives you so many features, so many services that you probably want to build your application upon. So let's say I'm looking for virtual machine, I'm looking for databases, I'm looking for storage, for example, in that case, and I'm looking for, let's say, networking. If I combine these four, I would say this is where, and even for virtual machine, I will call it as compute there. Now, if I combine all these four, this is what we call as a fundamentals core services. That means these fundamental services are the one that will ensure that you are able to run your application. Now, when we come to these fundamental services and we are leveraging Azure as a platform, obviously Azure gives you a service on virtual machine, and you can launch a virtual machine. Let's say I'm running my server 2090. And that server 2019 is running my Active Directory, and then I have my set of users who are now further going to access some application. So what is required? Something is required at this stage, that you want to build security at this segment. You want to figure out a mechanism that I can secure this accessibility from the set of applicant, the user there. Then apart from this, you also would need to have some kind of compliance. Apart from security, you want to have compliance. You want to ensure that whatever is being accessed is compliant based on your organization policy. Let's say you have a compliance policy that in any situation, no one should be able to launch a resource, launch a virtual machine in, let's say, China, just for example. Then in this case, what happened? You have to fix a compliant policy which will be able to help you do that. What about the next? If you look at compliance, you also want to ensure there is an audit mechanism. You also want to audit in that case. So you create an audit mechanism. So you want to ensure that once you launch a virtual machine, you're able to audit the logs, who is doing what, who is accessing what records, and everything around that process. And that will ensure that you are leveraging these services, with your comfort. And where this is based on, this is all based on the foundation of trust. The trust of who? The trust of Azure as a platform. So if now you can imagine, we're looking at the solution where we've got compute as an offering, we've got database as an offering, we've got storage as an offering, and we've got networking. If you combine all these four together, we can pretty much build any kind of solution that can exist on the planet. And we want to ensure that if we are running this on Azure, we need to have same level of accessibility, same level of control, same level of policy enhancement, so we are able to be compliant enough. You want to figure out this way to do this, and that will only happen when you have a mechanism of building this trust model. That means the first thing that I would address is I want to control my access with the policies. And that's the first thing you want to do. You want to access the address with the policy. And today, the organizations, they need to be able to provide access to their resources, regardless of the users or the applicant environment. But before you want to allow access, you want to assess the user's location, probably want to assess their role in the organization. Probably you want to assess the health of the devices, the type of the services, the classification of the data they're requesting access to, or a lot more in that. And to do this effectively, we probably want to use Signal and some kind of automated policy informant, so you are able to deliver the right balance between the security, and you want to give an optimal user experience. And this zero trust security model is something that is going to rely on this automated enforcement of the policies, so you're able to ensure compliant access decisions through this digital state, I would say. And the framework that you are probably going to build is going to be helping you to control those security solutions and the tools which eventually are going to allow your organization, so you're able to fine-tune these access policies with the contextual user, even based on devices and the location, and they kind of help you to build what I refer as a zero trust into your organization. So the zero trust is the most important concept that exists on the security front of any cloud provider. It's always zero trust. Now, a zero trust approach, it should extend throughout the entire digital ecosystem that your organization trying to build there. It want to serve as an integrated security philosophy. You got to have an end-to-end strategy. And the way you would want to implement zero trust, I would say it kind of divides itself into 6 segments. And the way I will define those 6 segments would be I have to secure identity. Then I am looking for the devices, let's say. I am looking for applications. I'm looking for data to be secured. I'm looking for the infrastructure on which my data is kept, and then probably the network which is communicating. So if I just talk about identity for a sec, now identities, whether they represent people, whether they represent services, or even your IoT devices, you define the zero trust control plane there. So when an identity attempts to access a resource, you have to verify that identity with a strong authentication, ensure access is compliant. And typically for that identity, you should be always following the principle of least privilege. We call it PLP, the principle of least privilege, that let's say if I'm Vishal and I'm trying to log into a machine, I need to be only given access that is required. I need to be given the least privilege at that moment. So you have to be careful about identities there, because this is one of the focus area for you to invest upon. Then there are devices there. Now, once an identity has been granted access to a resource, your data can flow to a variety of different devices, probably from IoT devices to smartphones, or you have your bring your own device model, so you're able to partner these managed devices, and then we have these on-prem workloads to the cloud hosted servers. There is a diversity that's create a massive, what I would say, an attack surface area, which requires that we monitor and we enforce this device health and compliance for secure access around the process. And then there are these applications and APIs that that kind of provide you the interface by which the data is consumed there. And there may be legacy on the prem, lift and shifted to cloud workloads, or these modern SaaS application, and controls and technologies should be applied to discover the shadow IT, and you will ensure there's an appropriate in-app permissions, and there's gate access based on real-time analytics. So you want to be able to monitor the abnormal behavior. You want to monitor the control of the user actions, and you want to validate the secure confirmation option that everything is secured as expected there. And then we've got this data eventually. Ultimately, if you are a part of the security team, you need to be focused on one very important thing, that is to protect my data. Now, wherever it's possible, your data should remain safe, even if it leaves the device, if it leaves the app, if it leaves the infrastructure or the networks that your organization is controlling. So data should be classified. It should be probably labeled. It should be encrypted. And I should always ensure that the access is restricted based on all these attributes. And then there is the infrastructure. Where am I storing or running this entire set of resources? That infrastructure could be your on-prem server. Infrastructure could be your cloud-based virtual machine, could be your containers, could be your microservices. Everything represents a critical threat vector. So assess for version, probably assess for configuration, assess for access to, you are able to harden your defense, probably use a lot of telemetry data so you're able to detect the attacks and anomalies, and automatically block and flag those risky behavior and take those protective actions there. And ultimately, there is the networking component. Now, all the data is ultimately accessed over my networking infrastructure. So networking kind of controls, and it can provide critical in-pipe control, so you're able to enhance the visibility and help probably prevent these attackers from moving literally across the network. And network should be segmented, and then there is real-time threat protection should be there. You got to have this end-to-end encryption model there. We got to have monitoring in place. We got to have analytics in place. So everything needs to be employed in order for you to get the job done. And that is extremely, extremely important there. So if I kind of combine all these segments together, and let me bring that slide screen for you. Let's say in between, I have my SPE. Now, SPE stands for Security Policy Enforcement. This is more of like a mechanism which will help you to insert the policies. Now, the first thing we discussed was identity, right? So let's talk about this, combine identity. Now, identity can come from probably any kind of IDP, which is identity provider. It could be you can put some kind of multi-factor authentication for that. You can even have your users and their sessions, probably everything needs to be combined there. And then it kind of goes to your evaluation metric there. And then if you recall, we also had devices there. So if we had devices, now devices could be two kinds. One is a corporate device and one is an unmanaged device. A corporate device, which is something your organization has given to you. And if you look at unmanaged device, that could be your, let's say that could be your mobile phone, probably. That's an unmanaged device that computer is already managed. So you combine these things, you probably create what we call as a device inventory, and then we provide every device an identity, right? And then we ensure the risk and compliance and combine that together to this case. And here I can have, let's say, this set of policies, which I can call as my org policy, the way my org needs to behave. And then I'm ensuring that it's being followed by there. And probably, I have some kind of threat intelligence in this place. So forget my drawing here. So I'm going to call it as threat intelligence. So we are doing some kind of threat intelligence. And then on the right, you would have what? You would have data, you would have the apps, you would have the in front case, and then we have the networking in place. So if you think about the data, you want to, as I said, classify the data, you want to encrypt the data, and eventually this allows with the policy. You have application, you want to give your application the principle of least privilege there. Again, a part of the SPE, which is security policy enforcement there. You have your infrastructure. You don't want everyone to be able to access the infrastructure. Or I would say, I can combine infrastructure and network because they kind of go hand in hand. If I have a virtual machine, I would have a networking in requirement. If I have a storage device, I will still have networking requirement in order to define the accessibility there. So in this case, I can do some kind of, threat protection, and I would be able to build a job, and eventually I can actually connect there. So this entire segment that you see right on the screen is how I would define as a zero trust boundary. Because as you can understand, and if you can relate there, I am not taking any segment as that I trusted already. There is no trust that is already done. Nothing is trusted already. Every time a request needs to be done, it needs to be authenticated. If it's not, you will not allow that. If not, you will not allow that, no matter what happens there. So the security at all point of time needs to be done. And for me to achieve this on Azure, now you can imagine we need a lot of tools. We need a lot of resources, which would eventually help you to build a system like this and build a solution like this. So how does this really work? Let's kind of go back to your slide. So if you look at a solution there, the first thing that happens to have security. Now, what comes under security? That Azure is saying that, hey, I would be able to help you, keep your data secure. Now, Azure says it is going to help me to keep my data secure. I have to believe it. I mean, is that how it's going to work? You will say, no, I'm Vishal. Why will I believe that? What's the mechanism? Which kind of gives is a model there. So Azure has a responsibility when it keeps your data. It kind of secures your data even at the rest and in the transit. So it has a state-of-the-art encryption where Azure is going to protect your data both at the rest and in the transit. And Azure secure your data leveraging different encryption methods and protocols and algorithms. So basically what happens there, for data at the rest, all the data written to Azure storage platform is encrypted with the help of the and hold on, that's the color, I don't like it, not at the stage. So it's protected all this with a 256-bit AES encryption and is also compliant with the FIPS 142 compliance status. So a proper key management is essential. And by default, Microsoft managed keys kind of protect your data. And you have a feature called as Azure Key Vault, Azure AKV, Azure Key Vault, which ensures that the encryption keys are properly secured. And Azure Key Management also helps you to have the server-side encryption that uses your own managed keys, or you can have your customer managed keys and say that, hey, Azure, I have my own keys. You want to use this to encrypt my data. And then when we talk about the data that is moving in the transit, that is a part on the rest. So this is, let's say, data is in the rest. But when you talk about the transit in the data, your data is moving between user devices and Microsoft Data Center, or probably within that, or between the data center themselves. Microsoft adheres to an IEEE standards of Azure 2.1 AE Mac security standard. It's something which is industry accepted standard there, and it leverages and enables the use of all these industry standard encrypted transport protocols. So I'm sure a lot of you would have heard about TLS, or there's IPsec in terms of VPN, or there is SSL. I'm sure a lot of you heard about. So Microsoft has a responsibility to defend your data through clearly defined and well-established response policies and processes, and you have the strong contractual commitments, and if need to be court, Microsoft defends your data. So we believe that all the government requests for your data should be directed to you. So we do not give any kind of government direct or unfettered access to customer data. From the Microsoft perspective, Microsoft is principled and transparent about how it is going to respond to the request for data, because at Microsoft they believe that you have a control over your own data. They're not going to disclose the data to government except as you direct that, or what's required by the law there. And if Microsoft has receives a demand for a customer data, they will direct that requesting party to seek the data directly from the customer. And if they're compelled to disclose or give any access to customer data, Microsoft will promptly notify the customer, give this demand of information, unless they are legally prohibited to do that. So you can understand that Microsoft follows all the privacy standard, whether it's GDPR, whether it's HIPAA, whether it's High Trust, FARPA, Japan My Number Act, Canada, PIPDA, Spain, LOLOPID. I mean, every standard you can think about, there is a grade. And if you want to believe what they have to do this, you want to probably look at the online service from agreement, where they kind of define all these sort of processes of how this was going to happen there. So you can understand now that Microsoft has a commitment to the privacy. Microsoft has a long history to, to in terms of dedication to, I would say, data privacy and even the protection. And it has evolved over many decades of being entrusted with the customer data. And this trust and experience has shaped the company's, time-tested approach. So they're able to apply the highest standard of the protection. And when Microsoft envisions a new product or services, privacy and data protection principles are considered at each phase of the development. This is a part of a privacy by design philosophy, which describes not only a way of building product, but also a model for operating the services and structuring those integral governance practices there. And this comprehensive approach will extend to all the people, to all the processes and the technologies that can help you to maintain and probably enhance a privacy protection for the customer there. And then we are going to put all these things behind it because your data is secured there. Now, this also comes to one interesting factor, and I want to kind of bring it at this moment. When we talk about security, now when we are leveraging even the cloud and we're talking about security, security is a shared responsibility. Now, why security is shared responsibility is an interesting question. That if you are on the cloud platform, you're paying them the money to host your services, why this becomes a shared responsibility. Now, when the data you collect and store, it resides in the cloud, the security of the data becomes a responsibility that you have to share with Microsoft. Now, while you're still responsible for some aspect of the security, Microsoft kind of becomes responsible for other segments around there. And depending on the applicable cloud computing model, you can have the security kind of defined to you. So based on that, and as I said, the most basic model there, Microsoft give you the infrastructure, and we call it IaaS. So they give you the infrastructure service, and they are going to kind of take care of everything. So if you look in this case, and let me try and address this basically. Let's say you have on-the-prem system enabled. And on-the-prem, you are responsible for the physical security. You are responsible for the host infrastructure. You are responsible for the network controls. You're responsible for your application control. You are responsible for identity and access management. You are responsible for, let's say, your client protection. You are also responsible for data classification, even accountability. Now, when we move from the IaaS, the on-prem to IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service, where you are leveraging a cloud provider and you are basically using a service on that cloud provider. So what happens in this case, because the infrastructure is now completely managed by Azure, there is a shared responsibility. That means in Azure, your Microsoft becomes responsible for the physical security because they are the one managing the data centers, those devices there. When we look at the host infrastructure, I would say that is kind of divided between the user and the Microsoft there. Even your application controls, your identity and access management is divided among them. But in the IaaS, you're still responsible for everything that relates to the endpoint protection or your data classification. You still have to manage that as a part there. Let's say you go and you move to a segment of platform as a service. That means you are now leveraging a service. Let's say I want to, so I'll give a simple example of platform as a service. Let's say I want to deploy a SQL database. Now, what would I do for that? I can actually go and launch a virtual machine, and that virtual machine launch my SQL, and then manage my virtual machine and SQL. That's one way of doing that. That is where I'm leveraging IaaS as a model. That all I needed is infrastructure, and I will do the rest. If you go on Azure and you use Azure SQL DB instance, and what Azure is doing, Azure is saying that, hey, you know what? In order for you to manage your VMs in SQL, you don't have to do that anymore. I will handle that for you. And you will say, okay, Azure, that is very nice of you. So when you handle, are you going to also take more responsibility in terms of securing that infrastructure? Because now it's not just the infrastructure. You're also responsible for my SQL instances there and the virtual machine on which you're running. Azure said, yes, I will take care of that. That means this becomes platform as a service. We've got a PaaS model where you're saying to Azure, Azure will say, I will take care of physical security because I'm now running your virtual machine and SQL, everything to make that run. I will also take care of the host infrastructure. I will also ensure that I control the network security part, but you're still responsible for your application control, or we can share a part of that. So Azure will say, I will not give you access to the master databases because we want to control and ensure that the database is running exactly. So you and Azure share a responsibility in that capacity. And then identity and access management is something which still needs to be shared there. And then you have a SaaS model where you say, you know, Azure, all I want to do is leverage a service that does a specific job. And do you have that? You'll say, yes, I do have that service, you know, and you will say, okay, fine, let me use the service like a CRM, let's say, or any other solution that Azure offers you, where you can just quickly go and just get started. Think about a machine learning service. This is all completely, you know, SaaS and PaaS model. You don't have to really leverage or build your machine learning system or deploy infrastructure or even get the software. You just go to Azure and say, Azure, hey, Azure, can you please do that for me? Azure will say, absolutely, I am more than happy to make that happen. So what is going to happen here? You will ensure this as a process. You will go in the SaaS model. And a SaaS model, you can imagine the physical security is taken care by Microsoft. The infrastructure is taken care by Microsoft. The network control by Microsoft. Your application control is also Microsoft, because they're kind of doing a SaaS model, but you still control, or you're still responsible for the identity and access management. Let's say you're still responsible for the client protection, and you're still responsible for your data classification, how you want to do that. So now I hope you're able to understand how the responsibility for the data security is shared across the Azure in that case. So in the correct say, Microsoft is responsible for building the services and feature that can be used in compliance with the applicable data protection and the privacy regulation and the standards. And you are kind of responsible for configuring those online services you use and probably train your workers to use those services in a way that they maintain the compliance requirements for your industrial location. Microsoft is also responsible for creating, I would say, a strong operational control, so they're able to protect the customer data in the cloud. And using the as a customer, you're responsible for, I would say, using and configuring those services in a way that you are able to limit the unintended access there. So this is a very interesting feature that kind of happens to exist there. And if I kind of give you, a simple example, you can look at a lot of segments on, shared responsibility for the cloud computing, and you will find so many example that Microsoft implemented the whole objective there. So this is an interesting concept that needs to exist at all point of time, that you're able to follow through, you're able to understand in the capacity. And then it comes to privacy, which I said, you are the one who owns and control your data. That means in the case of customer responsibility, your data is your business. Microsoft does not really know what kind of data a customer is choosing or customers are choosing to store in Azure. Now, the data you store in the cloud, your customer data, it belongs to you. And I would say your organization that owns that, and it controls the collection of the data, it controls the use of the data, it controls even the distribution of data. So when your organization is going to collect and store, and I would say process that personal data of the customer or employees or any individual, you are obliged, or you have an obligation to protect the privacy of that information, whether it resides in your on-the-prem network or in the cloud. You're also responsible for complying with the laws and industry regulations and contractual obligation, probably your public expectation there that may apply to business. And to take this data protection responsibility, you want to probably uh, explore a comprehensive protection framework where you are able to identify the personal data, probably trace and identify all the type of data like the personal data. And then you want to assign the data to some kind of categories based on the sensitivity level. So the appropriate controls can be done. You want to have some kind of, let's say, data governance practices and processes. So you want to define the policies, the roles, and the responsibilities for the access or the management, and eventually have some protection measures there. You want to leverage appropriate technical and uh, you know organizational measures that can incorporate the data privacy and the protection principles, so you are able to integrate the necessary security safeguards into the collection process there. So you can say that data governance is something which is taken very, very seriously when it comes to Azure as an example or as a model there. And you have to be very, very careful about that. You have to take this inbuilt as a process. And when you come to Azure, there are so many features which can help you to ensure that you have a visibility of what is happening in Azure. You have a visibility on how the resources are being accessed there. And there are different services which on Azure can help you to leverage those kind of options. And those are the thing that you probably want to understand in terms of security. You want to secure, let's say, the workload. And when it talks about the workload, I believe this is where it's important for you to take Azure in a capacity that you leverage and control the access from different inbuilt tools that Azure has to offer there. Probably you want to leverage Azure Active Directory. Probably you want to leverage single sign-on. Probably you want to leverage multi-factor authentication. All of these things needs to be uh, addressed, or I would say access in the Azure, so you are able to get the job done. You're able to ensure that there's a proper level of access for the set of resources that are running in Azure. And then obviously the encryption kind of is very important to kind of get a job done. So this is an extremely important aspect of how you are going to ensure and build a system that will eventually give you a model of security in the most easiest possible way, and you would probably get this thing done eventually. I mean, you have to, let's say, set up an Active Directory so you're able to set the authentication for your application or restrict to your app by some IP addressing. I mean, you can do a lot of things in that capacity and kind of get the job done, and that is also a way of how you are going to ensure that there is always a restriction. There's always a process which can eventually help you to build a secure solution. That means your privacy is your necessity. Your privacy is your journey. I would say you don't have to really look at Azure that, hey, Azure, can you please help me to do that? Azure will say, no, 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 I am not going to help you do any of these things, because it's your responsibility. It is your aspect that you have to really build the model there. And that is why shared security responsibility is such an important topic that you have to also understand and address there. And when we look in the shared security modeling, uh, one of the things that you also have to ensure, I would say, it's more of like having a defense in-depth approach. That means starting from my data until the physical security, you want to have a system that can follow confidentiality, that can follow integrity, that can follow availability, and you will be able to do that. Because if you look the way the market is running, there are these data breaches there. And data breaches when your data is stolen, and your data would be in terms of your personal data, and that means any information that's related to yourself could be there. And there are different common security threats which could really result in a breach of personal data, like phishing. Think about tech support scam, think about SQL injections, all these things kind of happen there. Or if we go to more advanced attacks like dictionary attack or ransomware, or there are these DDoS, which are an attack, one of the most extensive attack, which uh, attempts to exhaust your application resources. So you have to figure out a way that you ensure that your data is safeguarded. And as I said, your data is your control. It means you have to ensure that it is properly encrypted in all the capacity. Encryption kind of makes the big difference there. And one of the ways to mitigate the common cybersecurity threats is to encrypt that sensitive or valuable data. Encryption is that process that makes the data unreadable or unusable to anyone who is not authorized to view there. To read that or use that unencrypted data, it needs to be decrypted, which requires a concept of a key, you can say, which is a secret key, right? And there are basically two top level of encryption that kind of exist in the market. So you have a symmetric encryption, and you have an asymmetric encryption there. And symmetric encryption is just a way you leverage a same key for encryption and decryption in the case, and asymmetric, which leverages a public key and a private key concept. So either of the keys can encrypt the data, but a single key can't be used to decrypt the data. You would always need both of the keys to do this. So again, obviously, when you're on Azure, you don't have to really worry about those kind of modeling, and you have to do worry about those kind of ecosystem to do this. And that's is where you kind of start adopting a cloud framework in that case. And if you're on Azure, Azure has a beautiful segment called as a cloud adoption framework, where you will be able to look at a set of documents and how they want to be leveraging their solution there. So it's important for you to understand the security concept and the methodologies, and be careful about the zero trust methodology, that you follow that at all point of time, and how the principle of least privilege makes a difference. And remember these foundation elements that we've had there: identity and devices and application and data, and all that kind of happens to exist there. So this is an important segment there. And then there goes a shared responsibility that kind of happens to be there. So that's important to understand, that important to exist there. So if you look at, let's say, on the side, and let me open a simple stuff. Let me get an Azure portal for you to kind of, let's see, since real time. And let me get it logged in quickly. Where is my... Give me a moment. Now, if you look, I'm sure everyone is aware about the Azure portal. This is the portal where we are going to do everything that we think we should be doing, right? So this is a place where we kind of play around this. Now, in Azure, one of the easiest way to get started and to look everything is the security center. So if you look at the security center, you'll observe that security center is that unified tools on Azure that gives me end-to-end security posture of my services. So keeping your resources safe, as I said, it's a joint effort between you and Azure, and Azure and you which is the customer, you have to make sure that your workloads are secure as you move to the cloud there. And Security Center addresses three very important things. One, how is your workload changed or it's changing? It also addresses the sophisticated attacks which kind of happens to be there, and probably some of the security skills in a short, in short, because skills are something which are not existing there. So Security Center is natively a part of the Azure services there, and it, it protects even the resources which are non-Azure. So that kind of makes this as a beautiful segment there, and you will be able to kind of get a job done. So in the Azure Security Center, if you see, I can look at my inventory to see what do I have here. And you can see I have multiple resources running on this in this right now. So you have this app service here, and you can see I have some kind of recommendation from this. So what happened? This gives you enough recommendation about what's happening with your set of resources there. So if you click on this as a resource, let's see what do we get here. So it's telling me that this is a web application, which if I look at this, it says that there is no TLS. Now remember, I've talked about encryption. It, as a security center, it tells you that, hey, you are having no TLS in the scale, and you should be updating TLS in the latest version of application. It also gives you the remediation step and how do you want to do this. That means if I go to an app service, and let's do this, so the beautiful thing about this is it kind of gives you recommendation. It also tells you where you can find those recommendations. If I go to, let's say, app services, we would have this app service. And if you look at this, it does say that, hey, go to app service and go to your TLS SL settings. And you want to ensure that you have to define the access as HTTPS. Now, once I do this, I know that my entire certificate, my traffic communication is going to be now encrypted, right? I can also buy a certificate if I need to buy one. So you can click on buy app certificate. It will take you to a portal, a place there. You can create your own set of certificate, and you can see there's a cost for that certificate. If you need a standard certificate, it's about $70 a year. If it's wildcard and throughout a domain, that's about $300 a year. So you can define those set of names. You have these certificate issued for you, and once you have the certificates, you can bind those certificate with the specific app service. And once you do this, it will start giving you that, hey, it's not done. And if you click on take action, it's going to take you to a similar page and tell you that, hey, you can take an action right from this prospect. So that's one of the examples. If you look at this SQL server that I'm having here, let's see what recommendation I'm giving. I'm giving that there is no vulnerability assessment. It needs to be enabled on the server. And if I click on this and I click on fix that process, you can see that this action will enable the SQL vulnerability assessment on the server database. So I can, okay, go ahead, fix the resource. So what is happening, you see that Azure is ensuring that you are in a situation that you should be able to keep your data secure regardless of how it is happening. So now if I go back to here, and this will get refreshed in some time, I should not be having this this kind of alert anymore here. It says that your Azure Active Directory Administrator should also be provisioned there. If you click on take action, it's going to take you to this and say that set an admin for this server. You want the server to have an admin. You can't really have a server without an admin. I would say, okay, that makes sense. Let me do that. So I will write AZ400, which is my real user in this case, which is this, as you can see. So it doesn't, so we can't have Microsoft account. So we need to add something which is not Microsoft account. So I can create an account and then add this as a part of it. So eventually the objective here is that you are able to understand and follow the process that how Microsoft is going to take those necessary actions about this. And you are responsible for all the aspects there. Now, that's one of the segment. What happens if Microsoft doesn't really bother about all these things? How do you believe that Microsoft is really following all the compliances? That means we come to the next segment here, compliance. Now, compliance is something that Azure conforms to the global standard. Compliance plays a critical role in providing assurance for the customers. And I would say this is an important element in this zero trust relationship. Now, through the rigorous and widely recognized forms or formal standards which are certified by all these independent third parties, Microsoft is able to help the organizations to comply with these constantly shift requirement there. And even in terms of regulation, you're able to understand that. And the way I've said it before, that Microsoft gives you a broad set of compliances throughout the industry, which you should be able to, get a job done. You should be able to see that how Microsoft complies with that security. And I will show you a simple page, which you will be surprised and amazed to know at the same time that yes, Microsoft does apply there. So look at these compliance offering from Microsoft. That this is compliant with all the necessary certification that probably could exist in the market. That means rigorous audits are conducted by independent accredited third parties like, let's say, BSI, for example, or Deloitte, for example, who are going to validate whether the Microsoft Azure is adhering to these standards or not. And through its long-standing partnership with the legal and compliance community, Microsoft has, developed a wealth of resource for the professionals who need, let's say, relevant information on all these key regulatory and compliance considerations which are associated with the cloud computing. And this includes, I would say, privacy law requirements that kind of applies across all industries and sector specific guidelines and regulation. Now, what it does, it helps you, or it's up to you to determine whether the Azure services comply with a specific law and regulation that are applicable to your business, which can help you to kind of get the job done. And even in Microsoft helps you to make the assessments by providing you a specific to that compliance program. Like they will be able to give you a lot of audit reports and compliance packages, so your auditors can compare the Azure results with your own legal and regulatory requirements. And you can verify the Azure implementation of controls by requesting these details, audit results and reports. And a lot of them are free to Azure customer and a trial. So we have this something called as the Trust platform. So you can leverage this Trust Fab platform, which can help you to find a lot of information about there. So this is the platform, as you can see, called as a Microsoft Services Portal, in which you are able to actually build a solution there, build a system there. So if you kind of scroll down here, there's a Trust Center at the very bottom. If you click on the Trust Center, this is my Trust Center, and you can show it's going to gives you all the information about this process and how they are kind of building the system, the necessary resource in terms of compliances and law enforcement, and how they want to be building there. So you can leverage this as a solution there, and you can look at resources based on regional aspects. You kind of go here, it shows you Australia regulatory and policy compliance documents. You can look in that capacity. You also would be able to base the document based on this and the services and the parts. So you can look at what services I'm trying to look at the document. So Azure is compliant with all these necessary options that you would want to refer down the line. That okay, now Azure says that's compliant. Where can I validate? Where can I look at whether the authentication is there or not? So you want to be careful in terms of compliance offering, because as you can see, that Microsoft is offering you one of the most comprehensive set of compliance offering of any cloud service provider to help you comply with either your national or regional or even the industry specific requirements which are governing the collection or use of individual data. And these offering, I mean, these compliance there are compliance which are globally acceptable offering, and then there are compliance which are just made for US government. So for example, I have certain venture in the America, and then they have to follow the FedRAMP as a compliance, which is a federal risk and authorization management program. So you can actually look at them, and let me see if I look for the FedRAMP somewhere. Yeah, there we go. You can see FedRAMP is one of the important things. It's a program established to standardize approach processing, monitoring, and authorizing cloud computing product. So this is one of the things that you have to follow, because we are kind of in the fintech space as a product there. So you can look at these set of compliance. You are able to understand the Microsoft compliance nature and how effectively Microsoft kind of does the job for you. And these solutions, you can imagine, can help you to also build a system. And in Azure, you have this beautiful a service, or I would say a beautiful offering, that is called as Azure Blueprint, which helps customer to build their application that are secure and that can comply with a lot of regulations like the GDPR and HIPAA, and both, internally and externally, they kind of help you to simplify the entire, if I have to say, the entire process to comply with Azure itself. So when we look at these solutions, you can imagine there are so many things that Azure kind of happens to have in this case. And this is a free service that gives you a lot of templates. You're able to deploy and update fully governed cloud environments to have a more consistent and a standard model there. And if you have ever used, let's say, Azure Resource Manager or Azure Policy, Blueprint is something which kind of differs from that, because it contains different kind of artifact, like there are resources and there are templates, everything around that. So one, you can leverage the policy. So let's say I'll show you a real-time example of policy to how to be. So this compliance that we just learned is on the Microsoft side. So Microsoft is compliant with all the necessary certification. So you are good in that. But what if I want to ensure that I am compliance, I'm crawling compliance based on my organizational standard? That means if I want to ensure, as I said, that no one should be able to launch a resource in any other region apart from central US. How do I ensure it is compliant throughout Microsoft? So I can use something called as policy. And you can see if I go to policy here, let's go to assignments and let's click on assign policy. We're going to create a policy, okay? And we will define a definition. So you have these predefined definition. Let's use the definition as location. Location. And you can say allowed location is the definition there. I've used this allowed location and I want this policy to be enabled there. Let's go on next. It says, what are the allowed location? I said, okay, the only allowed location should be central US. Okay, you do next, and you give a message, you are not compliant. Next, and it's going to assess the policy and create. Now, this policy is created for me. What happens now? Now I am, you can say, technically the root user at the moment, right? Let's do something. Let's go to Azure Active Directory. Remember the first thing we spoke about, identities? Let's go to Azure Active Directory, okay? Go to user and let's create a new user for us. Call this user as demo. Give his name here, Vishal demo, okay? Let me create a password here because I want to use something very simple, and give it a role to this user. I think we've given the, let's say, compute. What roles do you have? Let's probably give it a role as an administrator, this example, right? Now you're given this application, user the location. I can define user location, all this thing, but let's keep it stick for that. Let's see what's happening with this guy. Okay, we need to an Azure AD Premium user. Very bad. Okay, this is my dummy account, so I really can't do this. But if I do an admin, can I apply this? Okay, at least I have one role there. So let's do one thing. Now let's bring a new browser tab. And let's go to portal.azure.com. And let's look at the profile. So we're going to leverage this as a username. Let's enter. Okay, now that is give it the username here. Wow. Mark saying that, hey, Vishal, choose a better password, please. Let's do that. Let's choose a better password. Okay, so I've got a better password now. Okay, password did not match. Now it did. Skip now. No. Let's say this is a new user that I have in my account. I want this user to launch a virtual machine. Okay, let's see if this user can do this. Why this user is not having subscriptions there? Now I get it, what's happening here. Yeah, we have to set the active directory. So let me give this demo right from this here itself. Let's say I want to launch a virtual machine. I want to see whether my policies are implementation or not. And if you recall, we applied a policy for compliance. We said that this policy will only allow people to create a resource in central Europe. That means apart from the anywhere else, if I should try and create a resource, the policy should be able to block it. Let's try that. Let's create a virtual machine and use the same resource group. Give it a virtual machine name, demo virtual machine. And you can see this is US, Central US, all good. Let's try to change this to East US probably. Oh, there we go. Hey, Vishal, there's a policy in format that does not meet the requirement of the resource. It's not. The location is set to use US. It's denied for you. And you can see right away in real time that now you are compliant. You know that no matter what happens, any user will not be able to launch a resource that is not compliant based on your organization policy. And that is one of the big differences that Azure, in Azure, you can help it, is to comply. Now, compliance, as you can just remember we spoke about shared responsibility. This is a real-time example of a shared responsibility. One, Azure tells you that we are compliant in terms of all the necessary certification that exists, but then you want to be compliant based on your own organizational needs, then you have to go to Azure and you have to ensure that you have a right policy enforcement in place to kind of get that job. And that is something which kind of happens to do this. Now, I was talking about the Azure Blueprint also as a service. That Blueprint can also help you do something similar. So if I want to go ahead and let's first do one thing, let's remove this policy because I don't want this assignment for now. Okay. Now let's go to Blueprint. And you can see in the Blueprint, I said that the most important thing about the Blueprint is to allow any engineer or architect to sketch a project design parameter. And what these do, they allow you to define a repeatable set of resources that implements and adhere to your organizational standard. So Blueprint is more of like a declarative way where you can define or orchestrate the deployments of different resource templates and other artifacts like your role assignments or your policy assignments, your resource management templates, resource, everything kind of happens there. And when we look at a blueprint as an example, right, you go to this option of blueprint and let's create a blueprint there. And we want to start with, let's say, a blank blueprint, and let's give it a name as my new blueprint. Blueprint. Okay, and then you have to put the location in the location. You probably want to select your subscription there, which has to come in for me. And this is what I'm going to do. This is on my location there. And this is the definition you've defined there. Now you have to verify the name and the subscription is, effectively correct there. And then we go to artifacts, the next segment. Now, in the information of the artifacts, you can see we have certain options there, right? You can add a role assignment. You can add an artifact under subscription. So let's try add one artifact. And in the side of it, we can select different assignments. You can see we can have a role assignment, let's say, and we can give a role, let's say, a contributor, and probably we don't have any user. That's a weird part. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's keep it dynamic. So we're going to keep it as dynamic there. So we'll add it there. Now, once you have this, you can see there's an option there of the aspect that you have added the role as a user, and you can add certain assignments to that level. So if you look at this assignment, then in the case of the subscription there, you can add more artifact. If you want to do this, you can have even a policy assignment. And look at this, there are multiple policy assignment there. And let's search a policy assignment for probably the one that starts with tag. So if we look at tag, append a tag and so. So basically, when you want to have a policy which will comply with the tag, that there should be a tag at all the point of an association can do this to do this. And again, you can always have certain sort of policies to do this. So you have different parameters to kind of get the job done. And even if you kind of add one more artifact, let's say take it probably under the resource group, and we can define a resource group. I mean, you can have a specific resource group to do this, or you can set the value, or if not, you can even add that. So what we're trying to do, we are trying to add a certain set of blueprint at this process there. So you can see now you have an option to add a template. That in this, you want to basically have a template segment there. So you want to create a template parameter. So I think I have a template somewhere. Give me a moment. I have a template. Okay, got it. Let me put this template here. I hope you all know Azure template is a way to pretty much automate everything around this and kind of get the job done. So this template is right, and if you go to parameters, it's fine in that capacity. So as you can see, it's showing you the storage account value. So you have at your templates, you have template values there. And basically, you are always required to choose the right set of storage there. So again, you can define how this needs to apply there. And you can define this to the parameter probably. Let's call this as storage account. So we're complying with that. So you can see now we've got a couple of assignment policies there and kind of do this. And let's save the draft here. Come on. Now, once this blueprint is done, you can publish this blueprint as, come on, okay. I think we have one. Yeah, so you have this blueprint. Now you can publish this blueprint there. Now, because you've planned all the artifacts which have been added to the blueprint, it's unpublished it. Now, when you publish this, it will make this blueprint available to be assigned to the subscription there. So when you're going to go and publish, you have to give probably a version name here, give it probably 1.0, and you publish this. Now, after a blueprint has been published, it can be assigned to a subscription and assign the blueprint that you created to one of the subscription under your management hierarchy, and you would be able to get the job done. So let this blueprint is done. When it's done, I can assign this blueprint like you see there, and you can give an assignment name. It's going there, and probably give it to US Best 2 only, give it a version name, give it assignment policy here. All these things kind of happens to be there. Artifact parameter, all are kind of happening here, as you can see here. This is kind of happening to becoming. So I don't have any user at this moment, but we do have this demo guy, or let's use this one. And you can set certain values here, and we can assign this. Let's give it a tag policy name. Let's say dev and resource group. Let's say RG200. If you have a resource group like that, that's a great name. Let's say RG200. Resource group location is West US 2. Value location is West US 2. And you assign this. Now, what happens that now I have defined a set of parameters for being compliant. So what if I'm going to go and start building resources in this account? They will be compliant based on this blueprint. So now what happens that now I don't have to go and start applying policies individually, which I did before as one of the steps. You always have an option there, but you also have an option to apply the policies individually. So again, for me to apply compliance, it's always up to me how I'm going to apply that in bigger venison. But you know that Azure gives you a lot of options that you can go ahead and you can apply these policies, you can apply these blueprints eventually to be compliant either at Azure level where Azure has the set of compliance offering, or from your level where you want to build a solution. And that's how you comply with the policy. And that's why compliance is an important thing, that Azure is going to comply to all these segments that kind of exist there in the capacity. Then the next thing that also is important at this stage for you to kind of address, for you to kind of build a model, is on the reliability and resiliency side. Now, what basically happens that when we talk about resilience, you are building your resource, right? You want to ensure that they're running as expected all the point of time. So resiliency, I would say it's not about avoiding the failures, but you should be able to respond to the failure. So your failure can happen because if you have created a policy and that policy, let's say you've given a user permission which the user is not allowed to have, an accident the user made a change which caused a problem. So you want to respond to those failures. And the objective of resiliency is to respond to failures in a way which avoids downtime and data loss there. And business continuity and data protections are critical issues for today's organization. And business continuity is built on the foundation of having a resilient system. So reliability and resiliency, they are closely related. Reliability you can call it as dependability and performing consistently well across the place, and resiliency is maybe, you can say, not maybe, but you could call it a capacity to recover quickly together. And these two kind of qualities are key to a trustworthy cloud service. So despite your best effort, disaster happen, right? They're inevitable, but most unpredictable. They are mostly unpredictable, and then they vary, right? There's almost never a single root cause of a major issue. Instead, there are several contributing factors, which is the reason an issue is able to circumvent different layers of mitigation there. And there's no way, I would say, to prevent bad things from happening. All we can do is add the layers and probably minimize the gaps and makes our system reliable. Now, making system reliable in the public cloud is the name, not the same way that you would do on your own data center, because cloud is an ever-changing, constantly evolving platform, unlike the usual on-premise model where you can achieve a greater availability by avoiding the change. In cloud, you don't avoid the change, you embrace the change. In the public cloud, change is inevitable and also it's beneficial, but you have to plan for that. Complex systems can fall in complex ways, and you need resilience to deliver reliability. Remember, you need resilience to deliver reliability. It's a goal that where resilience is a method by which you achieve a goal. So you want to make your system reliable, and you want to ensure the system are resilient so they are reliable. So resilience is going to begins with, I would say, availability. So reducing the amount of downtime and number of disruptions to services is important to the continued operation of your business function. High availability is something, a term that you may have heard before, is where you want to provide undisrupted continuity of your operations, whereas disaster recovery is something that you want to do when something goes down completely. So you want to ensure your systems are reliable, they're highly available. And in Azure, you have these solutions for different services. And one of the simple thing is Azure gives you an option of a virtual machine scale set. Now, virtual machine scale set is something that allows you to create and manage a group of load balanced virtual machine. And to provide the redundancy and improve performance, applications are typically distributed across multiple instances, and customers may be able to access your application through a load balancer that's going to distribute the request to probably one of the application instances there. And if you need to, let's say, perform the maintenance, or maybe you're able to update an application, you want to make sure your customer is not going to suffer in any case. So you want to easily create and manage multiple virtual machines, and you want to give high availability and application resiliency so that it's available at all point of time in there. And it's very easy to create those kind of mechanism, again, from this perspective. So let's say if I want to create a model here, let's go to my blueprint segment. And if I go to this blueprint here, And if I go to my home, now what do we need? I need a load balancer that can load balance the traffic across my virtual machine. That means you need a device that can distribute the loads across the traffic, and when something goes wrong, you should be able to do a job. So how do we do that? How do we achieve resiliency there? Because you don't want to have one virtual machine and that is going to run your application. If that virtual machine goes down for some reason, you are out of the market. You are not at all available, and that's gonna bring a great impact on your system. So what you want to do, you want to basically ensure there is a proper system. So what you do, you create a load balancer like this. Let's create a one quickly. Use the same group, source group, give it a name, dummy load balancer. Define the location, and here we can say this is a public one and school is standard, and I think everything looks good. And front-end IP address, let's add a front-end IP address. Choose okay, so what I would do, let's try see this. I think we can leverage this option. So let it create the IP address on its own. Oh, okay. The validation failed. Resource rule, dummy load balancer, types, go. Yeah, but we aren't having a IP address name. Let's create a new IP address there. Okay, add this, and that would be fine. Yeah, this is fine. So we've created a load balancer. We've given the load balancer as an IP address by creating a new IP. Let's run. And what we're trying to achieve is redundancy and resiliency, which eventually will give you reliability. So remember, resiliency and reliability are completely linked together as a system. So we create this as a solution and let this happen at the back end. All right, deployment is getting submitted. So meanwhile it's happening, let's go to here, and we have a marketplace. Let's go to marketplace, and I want to search the virtual machine scale set. Virtual machine scale. So you can see virtual machine scale set is an option there, and we want to basically use this to create a virtual machine scale set. You use the same resource group, give it a name, dummy VM scale set. Okay, now I don't recall. Where is my load balancer? Central US. Okay, very nice. So let's use this in the Central USA. Oops, sorry, what am I saying? Dummy VM scale set. And uniformity is all fine. I don't want to do this. The region we can find here. And image is something, so you can choose an image. Let's say choose Ubuntu 1804. That's more stable there. And choose the size of the machine there. In this case, you have to give it a username. So Azure user is the one that is given there. Now you can generate a new key pair as an option. Is this case, and basically, you have the option to do this. You can even keep a password-based system to do this. So I can say, let's say Vishal is my user, and password I will give here. Oh man, this is, let's give a better password. Imagine I'm giving a security demo and I'm saying that choose password. Anyway, I do it. Okay, so you do this model, and then you have the disk page. You can keep the disk as it is, not interested. go to networking, and you have a new option there. So you in the networking, if you see you have a load balance option, yes, I want to leverage load balancer. And you can see we have this load balancer, which kind of happens to be there. So this is a pool that is getting created for me in this case to kind of get a job done. So we're saying, okay, all good here. We can go to next step. Scaling is something you can define how many instances you need when something goes wrong and crazy. You go to health, advanced stuff, tags, review, create. And this is just a simple way of how do we achieve resiliency. Click on create. And this will eventually give us a model to deploy. Now, what happens there? If you don't need this, you can get a job done and kind of move from there. So basically, the whole objective of this set of model is you want to create a more system which is more resilient towards your deployment. And this is the way we can actually do this model. And this is the way we can auto scale this. So the concept around this is to have availability, is to have performance so that my resources, my system is always up and running. And you can see that the deployments are kind of happening, but it's pretty much done. So if I go to resource groups, this is the one, I would see this is my dummy load balancer. And then I have a DNS for that. This is the IP address that is assigned to this. So you can see this is dummy IP that we have chosen there. So when I'm going to create the set of resources, this IP address won't work right now, but oops, sorry, not new IP, this stuff only. This has nothing to do at this stage, but once you have the servers kind of running a job, I can, instead of me running my resources toward those server, I will access this IP address. And you can find those backend pools here, which I think is still in the creation process. Let's see. Yeah, so deployment's happening. So once it's there, I will be able to see those servers there. That means I have created a more resilient application deployment model, which is now scalable. So I am in a situation where I can build a system, scale it as and when the demand required. And that is something which kind of happens up there. So this is now done. And you can see my VM scale set is there. And I have the virtual machines, which the profile is there. You can see the virtual profiles are there. Look at the instances there. You can see there are 2 instances which we just ran. And now they can be accessed via the load balancer. That is how you define the scalability and resiliency across the model. And that's something which is, important to get the job done. So now, since we're here in this topic, so let's move further here. So this is how you do this. And then eventually, what we can do once we have set of resources, we have to manage the IP risk. So Azure can help you to manage and protect your IP, which we somehow saw in the previous demonstration. And that's, again, a way that you can define the IP address based on being public or private or how they are going to operate. And that's something which is there. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick short break here for about 10 minutes. We're going to come back and we're probably going to finish some of the more topics here. And I hope you all are enjoying the session already. Give me a 1 on the chat, everyone, if you're enjoying the session, you're able to follow through. Give me a 1 on the chat. And we'll take a quick short break for 10 and we'll come back in 10 and we'll get started again. All right. Let me bring a timer on the screen for all of you. And let's meet in 10, everyone.
Are we all ready to get started again? Okay, it looks like you're still, oh, there we go.
Oh, I'm here. All right, so I hope everyone is back here from the break. So we're gonna get started with the next segment for today, and this is gonna be the most interesting piece. I mean, we're gonna be looking closer to the end of the webinar, but I hope you all are enjoying the session to stay able to follow the things that I kind of addressed and showed you that how security is such an important thing that needs to be addressed. I believe at all stages so that you are able to build a system that is more reliant to security, that is more compliant, that is more structured, and to do that. And to talk about this, let's discuss the next. Oops, where's my mouse gone? Let's next discuss the next segment for this is the data protection. And I did speak about this in some capacity in Azure. It gives you a way of how to protect your data to do this, because data protection is something where Azure kind of deals with all of those models. Now, when we look at Azure data protection as a part, it's something you want to think about in the aspect of data benefits or data capacity of how Azure is actually protecting your data. Um, I believe in all the relevance there. Your data in Azure kind of gives you a different layer of security technologies and different layers of mechanism and practice and compliance. All these things kind of happens to go together to address this as an aspect. And Azure has this great aspect on what we call as Azure information protection there, which is a cloud-based solution that enables organizations to discover and classify and protect their documents, and everything kind of happens for that. So Azure, gives you data protection pretty much at every stage, and we saw Security Center as one of our tools to do that job for you, and then we were able to address those data privacy concern that if you're on Azure cloud, how do you do this? And we said that we are the one who controls our data. But at all point of time, I would say you are the one who have to design your own data protection strategy, because your data protection strategy is all about how you recover if something goes wrong from that case. So with so many organizations, you're looking to find ways to embrace the whole public cloud without really compromising security of the data, is they want to figure out a strategy of how it can happen there. And we've seen that in Azure, you have an option to encrypt your data in terms of modeling, where different services kind of happens to go there, and they're able to do this, and you are able to do this. Now, when we look at the data protection and security compliance, it is something which kind of being addressed, I believe, at every aspect. And we can add, or we can, get those keys imported and created, or if you are building your own solution, you can import your existing software keys to Azure Key Vault. We also can prevent and respond to those threats right away from the security center there. And when we saw how do we create security policies also as a solution, which again is a great way. I mean, Security Center automatically creates a default security policy for each of your subscription. You'll often find that you need to specifically configure certain aspect of a policy. And to configure security policy, all you have to go into the portal, get the Security Center, and from there you just look at a policy on this. So if I kind of go back here and quickly show you that segment around this, but if I go and look at the Security Center in this, and you have the security policy as an option there. You can actually look at a subscription you want to manage with this. So this is a subscription I want to manage, let's say. And here you can see there are some default policy which are a part of there. If you're going to give the vacancy, which are policies which are enabled as a part of the assignment, but you always have an option to kind of add some custom policy there. So we are having PCI DSS, ISO 27001, SOC, TSP. all these are already allowed, and you can enable or disable them again based on your understanding. You can add more standards if you are looking for. So that's again the way of how you are going to, how you be able to protect your data. You also can protect your resources with the help of Azure Security Center, because you can leverage the Security Center access and application control to block any malicious activity, which can limit your exposure to the threat there. And a feature to this protection is called just-in-time virtual machine access, which reduces your attack exposure by allowing you to kind of deny a persistent access to a virtual machine. That means we can have something called as a VM access policy, which could be a good there. And just-in-time VM access is something that you can normally use to lock down any inbound traffic to your Azure VMs, which again reduce the exposure to the attacks and eventually help you to protect your machines and the data. And once you enable this just-in-time, you can leverage different security groups and kind of be able to solid model there. So there are different mechanisms that kind of exist in Security Center. As you can see here, we have certain policies and we have certain settings there which can be existing there. So eventually, the job here that you should be able to, you are in a situation to protect your data at every stage. And when you want to protect, data protection is not is one thing about it you can do at the in transit. It has to be also done at the rest in all the capacity, because data needs to be protected. And Azure secures the data leveraging different encryption mechanism that we've spoken about there. And you can look at the Azure data encryption part of it, at how we can leverage there, leveraging the client-side encryption or leveraging the server-side encryption or the disk encryption there, which is again something I'm sure a lot of you, if you ever used Windows has a feature called as BitLocker. Azure kind of leverages the same thing. We can also leverage the Key Vault as a service to kind of get the job done. And if you look at Azure storage services, it automatically encrypts the data before it is stored and automatically decrypts the data before you retrieve that. So let's say if I go back to here and you go to storage as a service. In storage, what you need, the moment you create any storage account, if the storage account has some data, every data is kind of happens to be encrypted there. So you don't have to really worry about any of those encryption aspects, because Azure Storage kind of does that. But you can always, if you click on this, you can see this already encrypted with the help of the managed keys, and you can define a scope for that purpose. You have an option of access keys, so you can define the accessibility of the data, how this is going to be accessed, and you have the option of geo-replication. You have this data protection as a component there, where you can enable certain option of how and when to delete there, or if you want to enable versioning of the data. So it is very, very aspect to kind of do this. And you should be in a situation where, whether regardless of all how I am building the solution, I should be ensuring my data is protected at all aspects. And then eventually the shared responsibility for security, which we have addressed, that regardless of how and when I'm building the solution, shared responsibility is important in every cloud environment. So you want to be careful about the shared responsibility. You want to ensure that you are not just putting everything on Azure, say, hey, Azure, because we're on your platform, you are supposed to do that. There is a part on infrastructure security, there's a part on physical security, there's a part on availability, there's a part of security on the network side. So you have to be understanding that at what stages, at what step, at what scenarios, it is you who is going to be building the solutions and eventually securing that. So whether it comes to identity, whether it comes to network security, whether it's come to infrastructure security, whether it comes to data security, it is going to be you who is going to ensure that job is going to happen, because there is a security that has to happen from end to end. And that is what you have to understand. There's a great resource on Azure Docs, if you ever get time, read about that, called as the services security maps, which will tell you what services can protect you up to what extent. So you want to be careful about that. So things like, let's say, if I want to control the identity and access management, I can leverage Azure Active Directory, and there's identity protection, and then there are VPN gateways and firewalls and key vaults and service buses and Azure Backup and information protection. There are so many services that eventually helps you to protect yourself or safeguard yourself from committing something which can be catastrophic to your environment there. So you have to ensure that you follow the shared security responsibility model at all the aspect. And as I said, with Azure, because it does help you to take a lot of responsibilities on its shoulder, and Azure says that, okay, I will help you to address a lot of this concern, you would be in a better situation to manage and understand the security and kind of do this. And then all these platforms that Azure has, because Azure has Azure fleet, I would say, is composed of millions of servers, and thousands are kind of getting added every pretty much single day. So these servers, they do go under maintenance on a daily basis. So Azure kind of ensures that the platform integrity is ensured. They ensure the firmware security. They ensure they are enabled with the UEFI secure boot there. They ensure there's encryption at the rest at all point of time. Eventually, Azure is kind of building a model. It allows you to run the application and the virtual machine on that shared physical infrastructure. And I believe one of the prime economic motivations to run application in a cloud environment is you having an ability to distribute the cost of the shared resources among the customer there. So again, not just implementing this, you are also able to get the job done. And to have security, I believe one of the most important thing that needs to happen is the identity management, which is how you authenticate and authorize user, which involves controlling the information about those principles and these identities, which could be your services, which could be your application, could be your users. So you want to ensure that you are giving the set of permission to set of users who are only responsible for that. So you want to create and manage a single identity for each user across your enterprise, probably give them a single sign-on access to your application, enable probably the access to your application security, and leverage or enforce things like multi-factor authentication. And if you're giving some kind of remote access, probably make that happen with the help of Azure Active Directory application proxy service. So again, it's very important that you understand that Azure gives you security aspect, but it kind of comes to your side of it, because it's not just about identity. If you think about, let's say, networking, probably networking security is something where you want to protect the resources from any unauthorized access or attack. So identity access will give you and ensure that you are giving access to a set of user. And then there are these network security concept where you want to ensure that no unauthorized requests should ever come into play. That means you want to put a control on your traffic, and those where different services again come into place. You are talking about services like networking and network access control, and Azure firewall, and there's name resolution, there's Azure DDoS protection, there's Azure front door, there's Azure traffic manager. There's so many services again you have to be careful about in terms of config, because that's where your responsibility segment comes into play when it comes to Azure as a model. That's again a very, very important thing that you have to address at all point of time. And eventually, when we kind of comes into a direction of segment, and privacy is something which now we understand, and we want to reiterate those pointers again, that Azure gives you the ownership and control of your data. Azure says that it's your data, you control it the way you want to manage it. You will be the one who want to ensure that how my data is going to be accessed by me or by anyone else. So you are having a full control on the data modeling and how this needs to address, how this needs to happen, which eventually goes to the part on the compliance, which we have seen there, that compliance is going to be followed. Compliance is how your data needs to be addressed at all point of time, because you need to ensure that it is compliant there. And compliance is about data security. Compliance is about encryption. Compliance is about how I am storing the data. So eventually, when you go to Azure storage, let's say for your data compliance, you know that Azure is going to store my data in such a mechanism that I would be able to, I would be able to ensure there is a proper encryption happening. I would be able to ensure that when my data is publicly accessible or not, I will be able to ensure who can actually access it, and I would be able to secure my data with the help of the encryption. You can always check an option whether a blob is encrypted or not. You would be able to manage your encryption keys for the encryption account. You would be even able to configure the client-side encryption, probably configure the network security if you're trying to do some kind of transfer or in terms of data transfer there. And that is important. And probably you want to design your system in terms of failover, that how you can design your system for high availability of the applicant. That means compliance is not just about following those standards which is in the market, also about how you are compliant based on your organizational segment, their organizational rule there, which eventually will help you to address those objectives. And finally, the last piece is the same concept on resilience and reliability. And we have also addressed that why resilience is important, why resiliency is such an important thing, because resilience is important because it gives people the strength that is needed to process those hardship across the whole process. So when we talk about cloud, it is important that because cloud can bring that unprecedented scalability to your business resilience. It gives you an ability to provision new services faster. That means the faster I can build system, the faster I may be losing, the faster I may fail there. So it is very important that you have to build a model that is cloud resilient, and it should follow, remember, resiliency and reliability kind of go hand in hand. So you should always start your discussion and journey in terms of compliances to have resiliency in the front, because as the world continues to grapple with this whole, I would say, the COVID stuff, it's important for organization to have this robust scalable infrastructure there. And even under regular circumstances, IT downtime could be costly there, right? So you want to figure out a way that as an organization across the globe, everyone is embracing the cloud infrastructure there. And despite its many advantages, cloud infrastructure also come up with own risk there. And you want to prioritize in terms of modernization there. So you should be remediating those cloud specific risks there, and probably assess a downtime if something goes wrong there. And all this can happen with this proper strategy. So anticipating the issues and planning for them in advance can really help you mitigate the negative impact of the downtime. So consider putting a disaster recovery plan in place to ensure the business continues there, and take a proactive approach to security through these vulnerability assessments there. Take strategies which can help you prevent those breaches there. For example, let's say a company that requires, let's say, 99.9 infrastructure uptime, which means a maximum estimated downtime of, let's say, about 5 minutes a year. So you want to ensure that there's require close coordination with the cloud provider, so you're able to manage the configurations, the storage, some operational resilience parameters in great detail, which means increasing security measures by applying the right patches, applying the right service there. And that is something that is required there. So the right IT infrastructure will always ensure that everything runs smoothly, and it will be able to help you or help your business bounce back quickly in case of any unforeseen event and that's extremely critical for the business continuity. Therefore, having a comprehensive plan in place to identify and address these causes, downtime, is an important part of building, I would say, a greater business resilience. And that being said, brings us to the end of this beautiful webinar, where we spoke about some greater details about how we can leverage Microsoft security, compliance, and identity in terms of building a solution. And now I'm going to give the control over to the Netcom team to take it from there. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to me for the last 2 hours. And I hope, as I said, you were able to enjoy and follow the session throughout the last 2 hours. Thank you very much again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all that information. I know there's just so much more that we could even cover. Right now, we are going to go ahead and hear from Mary. She is our director of vendor and product here at Netcom Learning, and she's going to introduce some promotions and webinar related courses for today. Mary, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful, and that's a lot of great information that Vishal shared with us. And I just want to add more to it, sort of give you an awareness of how Microsoft is helping the customers adapt all of these security technologies they have added into their arsenal. So what the great thing is, it's all available to us. And how can we make sure that we are bridging that skills gap that we may have either for ourselves or for our organization? So can you see my screen, Leela?
I can.
All right. So what I wanted to do is to go over what are the new classes that Microsoft introduced? And I just want to briefly go through it while you're putting all your questions for Vishal. And in 5 minutes, we can jump right into it. So this is our website, netcomlearning.com. And if I go to the Microsoft page, I can see here more information about all of the courses that Microsoft has. And in fact, if I go to this role-based certification path, I can even see, all of the certification and the training to prepare you for that based on the solution areas that Microsoft has. So you have your Azure, which is your apps and infra, data and AI, and then your M365, your D365 that includes Power Platform. And then in the bottom, you're going to see the new solution area for security compliance and identity. So I just want to walk over, give you some sort of tips how to navigate the different courses that the Microsoft has for security compliance and identity. So earlier, Vishal has given us sort of a teaser on what the first class is if you want to get yourself familiar with the fundamentals. So we have SC 900. This SC 900 is a one-day class. And again, for those or even stakeholders or new or existing IT professionals who'd like to get their feet wet, start on their journey on this, then we highly advise to get this one-day instructor-led training. It's hands-on, and you're going to learn the concepts. And at the same time, being a Microsoft learning partners, we also only use the official courseware. And as I said earlier, there's labs, and you're being trained by an MCT, just like Vishal. And as part of our support to ensure that you can always go back in the next 12 months, we even provide you the recording of the class. So that is the first one. Now, if you collaborate with your organization's stakeholders to secure your IT systems and reduce risk by remediating active attacks in the environment, or you advise on improvements to threat protection practices, you investigate, respond to, and hunt for threats for Azure Sentinel, Azure Defender, 365 Defender, and other third-party security products, then the security operational or operations analyst course is the one for you. This is a 4-day class, and it is very much hands-on. Again, an MCT teach this, and this is using the Microsoft official curriculum. And as you go to the course pages, you can see the schedules that we have available. And if you have a team that you want exclusive training, we can also set up a private class for you. Now, the next class, the SC300, is if you design, implement, operate an organization's identity and access management system by using Active Directory, then this is the class for you. You're troubleshooting, you're monitoring, reporting identity and access environment, then this 4-day class is for you. And lastly, for the SC400, this is a 2-day class for the Information Protection Administrator. If you're planning, implementing controls for your organizational compliance needs, then definitely this one is for you. Now, there are more information about this. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So I would encourage you, some of you probably have learning consultants with Netcom. Please get in touch with your learning consultant. And if you don't have, please email us at webinar@netcomlearning.com. If you have been with Microsoft for a while, there are 2 existing security courses as well. If you're working on the Microsoft 365 environment, there is the MS500 M365 Security Administrator. And if you are on Azure, then the Azure Security Engineer is the right course for you. Now, I saw that some of you are, also corporate accounts of Netcom. Just a reminder, if you still have your SATVs, you still have up to the end of December, so you can use them for these courses, except for the AZ500, since Azure is no longer under SATV. Or you can also come and review our Learning Savings Passport. If you have a certain budget that you're working on, these two options will definitely give you that mileage, that optimal savings, wherein you can maximize your current budget. And we also recently introduced our Netcom Unlimited, which is our subscription program. So I invite you to look into this. So for you companies, for your companies, if you have a certain amount or a budget for your employees, this may be the right program for you. And even for individuals, this allows you access to up to 500 courses and e-learning solutions. So again, if you want detailed discussion on this, definitely we encourage you to book your time or to call us or email us at webinar@netcomlearning.com, and we can explain this further and see how it can better help you utilize your training budget. With that, I think also if you are having difficulties with your handouts, you can go to the handout section and just download this. And any other information, definitely please go email us so we can provide that information for you. Leela, I hope I didn't eat much more of the time.
You're
I will
awesome.
turn it
No,
back to you.
it's wonderful. We actually did have some comments about the handout not working earlier in the session. We were able to get that taken care of, and it is updated for those of you who are having troubles with it. Also, a little more housekeeping. I know we have several people asking about an e-certificate. Mary, do you know what kind of the situation is on the certificates for this class?
We will certainly get back to all of you. I know we don't have a certificate for this, just to let you all know, but we will, I know this has been a, request. We will certainly go back to our marketing department and have that and update you all on the, at webinar at Netcom. So you're aware if this is something you can present to your company, or probably share in LinkedIn.
Okay. And then I do have another question was, oh, sorry. I was reminded that the playback will not be up in 24 hours. It will be up in on Monday. And because it's the weekend, obviously. So you will get the playback not in 24 hours, but by Monday. So I wanted to let everybody be aware of that. So now we're going to go ahead and just jump into our questions. And let's see, what do we have first? What courses lead directly to an MS Azure certification? It is not clear what courses related to what certifications.
What kind of what was that the person referring to? The roadmap?
I'm not positive. They're asking what courses lead directly into an MS Azure certification. So
Right.
would
So
that be the
yeah,
roadmap?
for that question, I would refer first to what kind of role the person is. So if you are an IT professional, there are courses for all of the Microsoft role has a fundamentals course, right? And I'm not sure if Vishal is still here. Please feel free to jump in. There are fundamental courses. So say, for example, if you want to start with Azure, there is an AZ900 Azure Fundamentals. And then, you can actually, after that, you can go into the AZ104, which will prepare you for the Azure Administrator Associate exam. Parallel, you if you are a developer, there is also the AZ-204 Azure Developer Associate. So it is a long line. Like, for example, I mentioned earlier, if you're an Azure security engineer or you're targeting for that certification, there is an AZ-500 class. And there's a long line of roadmap. And what I would encourage this person is to, if you can reach out to us so we can explain this better. And at the same time, Leela, I just want to highlight, I believe I forgot to mention that Microsoft is heavily campaigning on getting the IT professionals certified. So if in case this is something that you're planning, we actually offering discounted rates on the exam voucher to help you get that certification under your belt. So I'm hoping that will answer, because it's a long line of courses and certification, again, based on the target role you have, or the target certification that you have.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I think that does clarify. I think everybody has a little bit of a different niche that they're wanting to go into. So certainly reaching out to us and getting that specific instruction as to what they need, if I'm understanding you right,
Yes,
is probably the best course to take in that situation. Then we are going to, let's see, what question do we have next? There was a comment more than anything. This is great information, because I think that companies get caught up in having data in the cloud, but forget about the security factor. And then our next question was, when the SW is installed in a load balance environment, does it automatically propagate across the load balancers?
It does not. You have to do certain configurations. So yeah, it's possible, but you have to make certain configurations to make it happen.
Wonderful. Oh, sorry. Was there more?
No, that's good. That's
Okay.
what it is.
Okay. So it says, hi, is template concept similar to baseline image in Active Directory controller?
Can you repeat that again for me?
Is template concept similar to baseline image in Active Directory controller?
Not exactly. Templates are more of a way to automate things in terms of deployment. So when you leverage templates, they're probably gonna help you to so what we call this as infrastructure as a code as a term. So the objective kind of becomes to codify the entire deployment instead of just doing it. But that those images that we have in the 80, they are more on the side of just give you a structure. But with Azure ARM templates, I can get a more idempotent deployment model, which is something more required in the world we're living in, because we want to automate as much as possible, and that's something which happens to exist here.
Wonderful. Let's see. This is a larger question. I know that NIST 866 is a good framework for HIPAA compliance. Are there any other frameworks you recommend for healthcare organizations? I know that NIST, oh, sorry, that was just put in twice. So.
See, if we look at HIPAA, I think HIPAA is obviously one important framework in terms of accountability and things. But apart from that, it's all about what kind of leverage you are using with the customer data. Because, for example, so I run a health tech startup where we leverage HIPAA compliant, and then we have to be PCI DSS compliant also in terms of that. So you have to be understanding on terms of business requirement, because saying that if you just want to keep the track of user data, I think HIPAA is more than enough. But if you want something to do more than that, then you have to be very careful in terms of understanding what are the directions that will make it happen. So that's the whole point.
Wonderful. Let's see. Our next question is, can we also do application whitelisting or blacklisting?
Yes, we can. For that, you have to again look into what kind of solution you're using. I would say you probably want to go with Azure VDI as a solution that can help you do that. So again, that's up to you how you want to leverage that solution.
Wonderful. Let's see. We had a couple people ask about the certification again, so I'm just going to go back over that. As of this moment, we don't have an e-certificate for the course. However, according to Mary, she said that they're working on contacting the company and seeing if they can get some sort of verification for participation in the class. You are welcome to email us for more information about that. You can email us at webinar@netcomlearning.com. And the playback will, Mary, do you know how long the master class will be available? We have a question about that.
Right. This one, give us, since it's Saturday now, give us latest Tuesday, just to make sure that, we set the expectation right for you all.
I think the question was more, how long will it be available? Is it indefinitely available once it's up?
Yes. Yes. Normally, I hope you come back in after a year, because technology changes as well, and we will continuously give you the most updated. So check back again for this particular subject. And we also have other master classes, but this year definitely you have access to it, if if that is enough time.
Wonderful. Let's see. Somebody did ask if I could post the email here. I will put it in the chat box so everybody can see in just a moment. Our next question is, can you create your own certificates internally rather than having to purchase them? I'm not sure I understand that one.
Yep, you can. So there's the option to create your own private certs, which is absolutely possible. And that is, I would say, the best practice to go forward, unless you already have a cert from someone else and you want to migrate that. You always have an opportunity to create your own certs.
Wonderful. Let's see. Our next question, which I'm glad we have so much time to get to the questions, which we don't usually have as much time. What certification would you recommend to go for after you have SC 900, SC 300, MS 100, MS 101, and AZ 500?
Wow, so you've got pretty much everything already. So if you go from that perspective, I think from the security side, I think you've done pretty much most of the aspects. So if I have to give you, probably you wanna so has done SC 900? Sorry, SC 300 is done, because that's the only one that I think is left. SC
Yes,
300.
they said SC 900, 300, MS 100, and 101, and AZ 500.
And go with SC 200. That's only left.
AC 200? AZ?
SC 200.
SC 200. Okay. Let's see. Our next question is there a good documentation for Microsoft best practices for a custom built HIT Trust plus ASC Azure policy?
See, so Microsoft doesn't produce documents like this, but for this, I would say you want to be going through your docs and see what are the best that may be relevant to you. I mean, there's only one doc which can suffice this purpose. You probably have to look at a few other docs that can get the job done, not just one.
Okay. Let me read these next couple questions. We've got follow-up to the load balancing. Your answer suggests that the load balancing is a function of the applications. Can you please elaborate that?
I'm not sure I got the question. Can you say again, please?
So they're following up on their previous question about load balancing. They said your answer suggests that load balancing is a function of the applications. and they were just hoping you could explain that a little further.
Okay, so the way I address this, I try and understand, the job of the load balancer is to distribute the traffic across the virtual machines which are there, right? That means when a customer or user is going to come and address our websites, what you would do normally, a load balancer get a DNS name, and you want to map that with the CNAME of your website. And when that happens, that means your load balancer is the one that needs to be addressed and loaded with the certification. So the traffic requests are going to be coming to your port 443. So if you say it's a part of application build, I would say yes, but eventually they kind of work in hand.
And let us know if that answered your question fully. Our next question is, do you need to take SC 900 if you already passed AZ 500?
I think I have to look for this. Is anyone can from Netcom can say that? I have to look at if there's a
Mary,
class.
do you know?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I know, right? You never know when we're going to spring one at you.
Okay,
huh?
okay, I saw the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so SE 900 is definitely, fundamentals certification. So you might as well look into the other intermediate training, Michael, for this one that may be more suitable, because the SE 900 may be a bit fundamental for you. That's
Okay.
just my yes.
Yeah. And I think once again that, and we have a couple other more specific questions about their specific paths. And I think that those are best answered. I don't know if you agree with me, by just messaging us and
Oh, certainly.
speaking with
Yes.
someone. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Because those are always kind of a little more catered towards your experience and where you want to go from there, if I understand
Right.
correctly. Yeah.
Right.
The last question I am seeing is, does Netcom provide IT professional certificate trainings, and how long are they?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. In fact, that is our day job, and we are learning. To put it simply, we love what we do, because I think with all the technologies, business process being introduced nowadays, there's a different kind of work, right? There's a different kind of dynamics happening, and if you will allow us, I think we can have a conversation that wherein we can help you from start to end, to whatever, wherever you want to be after the training and the certification. But definitely, especially nowadays, the way the different vendors, when I say vendors, Microsoft, for example, are structuring their training, it's really based on the job role that person is in, or that person wants to be in. So it is more effective, and you can transfer that skill right to the workplace.
Thank you
I
so
hope that made sense. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you, Vishal. I am not seeing any more questions. So with that, we are going to go ahead and wrap up. And like I said before, if you do have any additional questions, or if you wanted more clarification on the path that you should take, you are welcome to email us. I put that email in the chat as well. We're going to go ahead now and launch a quick poll to find out how many people might be interested in taking some additional training. In addition to our webinar today, we have a lot of informative webinars coming up. So please go to www.netcomlearning.com/webinars/ to register for any of those. We want to thank you all for joining us today. If you do come up with any additional questions, please feel free to send them to us at webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. And that's also posted, that is also posted in the chats. For some reason, I'm having troubles getting the poll posted. Okay. Is that poll visual? Is that poll up, Mary? Do you see that?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I'm not seeing it on my screen, so, okay. And we want to thank you all for joining us here today. We hope you found today's webinar to be very informative. We look forward to seeing you back here with us very soon. And please feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Mary and Vishal, for presenting today. Thank you everyone, and have a wonderful Saturday.
Thank you. Bye. Take care all.